Project Sapient is a podcast meant to engage our brothers and sisters in the law enforcement and military communities in conversations that we all know we need to have. All opinions you hear are our own, and they are protected by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. They are in no way reflect or are meant to reflect the opinion of any specific agency, officer, or service member. Some opinions may be controversial. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome back. Project Sapient is back again. And yeah, you guys are going to hear a lot of me lately. Got a few awesome guests that lined up and a few good topics that I really want to touch on, especially, as I always call it, the check the box training that never works. You know, within the law enforcement and first responder community, it's a big one, and it's something I will always touch on and always talk about. Make sure you are following up on Havoc Journal. I've got a couple brand new articles on there. Same with Objective Arte. I got some new stuff going on there. And tonight's guest actually was introduced through Brent Cartwright. If you remember, Brent was the guy we had on a couple, 3-4 shows ago, talking about his book Undercover Junkie and what an incredible story about, you know, bouncing back from that sort of world. And so he introduced me. He said, "Oh, you gotta talk to the doc. You gotta talk to the doc." I'm like, "All right, yeah, which doc?" There's plenty of. And he says, "Oh, Dr. Jennifer Prohaska." I said, "Okay." So, you know, he gave me a quick Cliff Notes version, and myself and Jen, we spoke over LinkedIn. And yeah, we have her on today, and I'm very, very excited because I've got questions. I'm sure she's got she's got a whole host of information. But let me go over her bio real quick. So, Dr. Jennifer Prohaska is the founder of Tactical Longevity and a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in neurorehabilitation, psychology, trauma, and critical incident response. She earned her PhD from University of Kansas in 2013 and completed her residency at the University of Kansas Medical Center, where she focused on treating traumatic brain and spinal cord injuries with life-altering consequences. Dr. Prohaska's expertise extends to use of force encounters, and she holds a force science certification, making her one of the few, I'd say very few actually, psychologists with advanced knowledge in this area. And as the driving force behind Tactical Longevity, Dr. Prohaska is dedicated to preparing agencies in high-pressure industries for critical incidents. Her scientifically backed methods are designed to help both individuals and departments excel, no matter their limitations. Since establishing her practice, she expanded her reach to support over 54 entities across 3 states, providing clear and effective programs that develop top performers ready for high-risk and high-stakes situations. Dr. Prohaska is also a nationally sought after speaker, known for her work with agencies on topics such as PTSD, chronic stress, leadership, mental health, and her deep experience in both clinical settings and public safety has made her a trusted resource for agencies looking to enhance their psychological readiness and operational effectiveness. Holy moly. Hello.
Sorry, they sent you the long bio.
No. That's fine. It's something that you know people need to know, you know, who you are and what it is that you do and why you're here. You know, Project Sapient, where we reach out to thousands, tens of thousands of first responders and, you know, even military veterans and stuff. So, you know, this is a great topic to talk about. And I'm always
myself, just so you're aware, ChatGPT was not involved in that bio. It's a great tool.
Hey, it's actually a fascinating tool. I'm getting used to it myself, and I'm just like, oh my God, it knows things, and I gotta be careful.
I did a little exercise the other day where I typed in just a prompt that was kind of like a therapy-ish prompt, And it nailed me. It really did. Like,
Wow.
it was kind of concerning. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna have a job. I gotta find another avenue
Can
here.
you imagine now it's going to be
Yeah.
Chat GPT as your therapist and it's going to be like a screen and some friendly face and it's going to be AI driven?
It's a little scary because what you pre-program in there, like the other questions you've asked it and that kind of stuff, all totally determines the output you get. So it's a new, interesting frontier. I'll say that.
Oh
But I
man.
was kind of like impressed. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Doc, this you go by Jen, Doc. What do you? What's your?
Yeah. Dr. Jan's fine.
Okay, Dr. Jen. All right.
Yeah, or
So,
just Jan,
oh, just Jen.
honestly.
All right, just Jen.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I mean, I've always been fascinated with neuroscience ever since I was a kid. Neuroscience, psychology, that was always like my thing, and that's where when I first started college, that was the direction I was heading, and then obviously September 11th happened and changed the whole trajectory of what I want to do, and so you graduated 2013 and got into the Kansas Medical Center. At what point did you really start your interest in the first responder, like law enforcement world?
Like, what's my entry point?
Yeah, yeah.
My entry, yeah, not like other people's. I know a lot of people who come into this profession as a psychologist working with first responders. They've got family members or they've been a first responder themselves. That's not my backstory at all, actually. I mean, it'd probably be a little bit cooler if it was, but it's not. So I'm born and raised Kansas girl, and I've always played sports and always been pretty competitive and got into graduate school, did the whole thing, got the graduate school programming done in Kansas, which is also kind of rare that you get your whole thing done in one place. Got hired on as faculty at the University of Kansas Medical Center. But before I got hired on as faculty, I worked with spinal cord injury, brain injury, the TBI stuff, stroke, all you name it, anything that was life altering, like my bio said.
Yeah.
And I did my residency in that, and I loved it. I freaking loved helping people get back to better. Got to work burn unit, ICU, emergency room, all the cool, intense stuff, right? And then just like in law enforcement, you know how you get hired on, you get moved to that lowest lady on the totem pole position?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I got moved to working at the KU Cancer Center, which is, by the way, a great job. It's just, it was a job where my role was to work with people who were largely terminally ill. So my job went from getting people back to good to preparing them for dying.
Mm.
And that burnt me out so fast, you can't possibly imagine,
Hmm.
you know? And so anyway, so I was there for the beginning of my career, starting my career there, and I just really, really, really missed working with people kind of in that competitive space, getting people back to well and
Yeah.
getting people where they want to go, not just prepping them for the end. So
Yeah.
I learned a lot in that environment where I'm prepping people for their end of life, but I am a better fit for something else, and that is not my lane. So I actually jumped and did not have a job lined up. I said, I will figure it out, which is it's so in line with my personality. And so I just jumped and said, hey, I'll figure something out. I saw an email come across my desk on something related to, hey, there's a private practice looking to work with forensic cases. And I was like, oh, cool. I've done some forensic work. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
Neuropsych and forensic has a lot of overlap. I interview. It ends up being in a law enforcement related practice. And then from there, I never look back, and I will probably never work with normal people ever again. So
We're a different breed.
like y'all have totally ruined me. I cannot do it. I can't do it. I tell these people all the time. Like, I cannot go back to helping, some lady self-actualize her future.
Yeah.
I need the hardcore intense shit. So that's why I have stayed in this lane. So I don't have that background that most people have, I
Yeah.
think, but it's a good personality fit, I'll say. So
Well, I mean, just with your knowledge with neuroscience and neurophysiology, all that good stuff. I mean, what did what was your like first impressions once you got into it?
you guys,
Yeah.
oh gosh. Man, I feel it's kind of like cocky saying this but I felt like I was home. I felt like I was with my people. And I think that, frankly, I was very much a black sheep in graduate school. I didn't take instruction very well. I was always just kind of bucking the system a little bit. And so I never really felt like I fed into that academic kind of stuff. So I think I felt at home. I felt really pretty quickly accepted, and I could be genuine and accepted. When I was trying to fit into academic medicine, I felt stifled, and I felt like one day they're going to figure me out that, I don't go home and listen to NPR and read more books. So yeah, I felt like I was finally home, honestly.
Yeah.
That's how I initially felt. That's how I felt. How I felt about you guys was like, holy shit, these are some really intense people
Mm.
that like the goodness of their soul, even when they're freaking grumpy and irritable and mean and nasty and coming off of midnights and coming into my office and they don't want to be there, like you can see they still got shine on their soul, you know? So
Yeah. I mean,
that's
that's
first and foremost.
that's a quite
Yeah.
the tough barrier to break through, to be able to sit down. I mean, a room full of cops just to train, when I do it, yeah, like I got to literally take a machete and just break right through, and this is me being a cop anyways, but interesting you say so kind of your take is just yeah, I mean, we deal with some intense stuff all the time. I work in a medium-sized city. I worked in Boston for a number of years, and yeah, Boston and medium-sized cities, two different animals, but like the crimes are there and everything's there. But like you said though, no matter how grumpy or whatever somebody is, when there's a call for help, they go help, right? Because that's just what we do especially as cops who are high performers. Now, I've always said in every law enforcement agency, you have this 80-20 split. 80% of them are just there, right? They're just doing the job, responding to calls, doing whatever. 20%, and of that 20, you have an additional 10%. So you have 20% who are actually carrying the department, literally, because they're doing awesome work. And then you go into that 10%, and those are your like really intense guys and gals like Brent, right? Like guys that are hunters, they guys and gals that just have that instinct, right?
Yep.
In order to do the job and to do it right and to have this sort of morality, I'll call it. And I call them hybrid wolves. You got the sheepdogs and the hybrid. I call them hybrid wolves. I said, you know what? There's an additional cop in there in that sheepdog. There's the
Yeah.
cop who is a hunter because me, like, when I was on patrol and doing my work, I was hunting all the time. I was out there. I was looking for stuff versus parking and waiting for that call. I wasn't waiting for a call. I go and I want to do something. And Brent was the same way. And a lot of guests I've had on here that are cops, just the same type personality that, we're gonna come find you. Like if you're a bad guy, we're gonna come find you. And the funniest story is when I was working undercover for a little bit with the DEA, and this really hardened dude once told me, hardened bad guy that ended up flipping and worked with me. But he told me, he said, man, you are the nightmare we all dream of because you just don't stop. The minute you're locked on someone, you won't stop. You just keep going. I said, oh yeah, don't fuck with me. Like that's just the way I am. But yeah. So I mean, and do you see that in working with all the agencies you work with, that sort of 80-20 split too?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that that's, one of the things that I think burns out your good cops is the 80% that are dragging it down, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
And I hate to be negative and start it out that way, but the 20% that are pulling the load, one of the most exhausting things is feeling like you're pulling the load by yourself.
Yeah.
And when maybe all your shift partners are total slugs, right?
Yeah.
That sucks. If you're the hard charger, there that you're setting the pace, you're setting the tone and the expectation of what things could be. And so sometimes you kind of, you can get in the wrong crosshair sometimes too. But yeah, absolutely 80-20 split, 100%. But I think that's that way in every profession.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Every
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And I think the reason why it sticks out so much, I think, on law enforcement, even military, like because the job is life and death, right? It's high stakes. It's a really intense game, right? Versus a corporate world or academic world where I don't feel it's as high stakes. Like when people tell me, this was stressful or that was stressful or whatever in their jobs, like my brother or whatever, I'm like, you know what? Let's go plan a SWAT op where you got to think of every single bad thing that could happen. And then you got to try to plan for every single one of those bad things. And then you got to train on every single one of those bad things. And then when you do the op, you hope to God that none of those bad things happen. And then when the op is done, you take a breath. You're like, okay, we're good. Everyone's good. So when I put it like that, like to my brothers or to some of my friends, they're like, yeah, that's a little different.
Okay. Okay. That is the cop version of the big fish story.
Yeah, okay,
But
yeah, go
I
ahead.
love it because they all are intense, right? But
Yeah,
I also think like get acclimated to a certain level of intensity.
yeah,
But I always tell people like you're the one who's changed. Everyone else has stayed the same.
Yep.
And so they have actually normal lives, like completely normal lives. And you're the 1 or 2% that's doing weird stuff.
Yeah.
And so it makes it really hard, I think, to relate to people. And so you can easily like one up people if you're not if you're not mindful of that. I notice that when I go hang out with other psychologists, which by the way, I do not do at all because we're a weird bunch, but
Are you all psychoanalyzing each other and everything?
more like just the weirdest, most awkward kid conversations you've ever seen. Just really awkward. It's like
Yeah.
right back in high school, like,
Yeah.
nerd kids at the lunch table. And so, we don't really hang out together, but I think you'll see the same dynamic in any profession. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, so my wife, she got invited to this house party or whatever, and just friends. I don't even really know them. She was like, "Yeah, just come." I'm like, "Okay, are they gonna be? I mean, who are they?" And she told me, and I'm like, "All right, let's go." I felt so out of place there. It's like, again, not to sound cocky or anything. I felt like you just put a lion in a sheep den. I'm just like in
Mhm.
there. I'm like, where am I? This is not my people. And then that same day, I ended up, hanging out at my buddy's, who's a fellow SWAT guy. He had a big house party. So the entire SWAT team was there pretty much, and other cops and everything. I'm like, yeah, I'm at home here, because just the way we interact with each other, and it really made me think of this. I saw this picture. I wrote a whole article about it too on Havoc Journal, and it said, "Sit with warriors, and the conversation will be different." And, that day really stood out to me for that, where I really was like, man, two completely different worlds. And like when they collide, it's never good, because we're just two different breeds of people. And that's just very natural, right? It's very natural to feel at home with, SWAT buddies or other cops or whatever. But I always also take into account, be mindful of the fact that hanging out with my, SWAT brothers and all that, like it's great. But at the same time, you would lose connection with the other side, right? Where
Yeah.
you
Which
lose.
is going to naturally happen.
It does. And the thing is though, like I will go out of my way to hang out with like my normal friends, we'll call them, just to get also it's a breather for me, like just to get out of that space and just have like a normal conversation about, I don't know, football or whatever, talk something else than just talking shop or whatever. And yeah, they'll like my friends will ask me different questions, but I don't really, I'm like, oh yeah, that's work. And like, so in your dynamic though, like with what you do, like what I want to go over is actually some of the stress and some of the performance aspects of what you see in when you're coaching these cops or you're talking to these cops. What is it that you see? Kind of, is there like a theme, or is there something else that you start to notice?
I was like so many lead up questions into that. So
Sorry, that's why I said I have a lot of questions.
because I should be taking notes on my side of what I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I'll back up and say kind of what I do with police departments, and I work with other kind of high risk entities too, not just PD.
Yeah.
So I will say that what I do with law enforcement now, I started out kind of doing a lot of critical incident response and one-on-one therapy and like evaluations for new hire, fit for duties, like the kind of scary shit, like
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
HR stuff that everyone
Yeah, yeah,
hates.
yeah. We all hate it.
Yeah, I know. And I still do some of that just because I have to.
Yeah.
But now I work mostly with high performing tactical teams or higher risk individuals. So that means a really, really high tempo tactical teams are really busy departments with their tactical teams. And then also if they're kind of, by the way undercover is going away,
Hmm.
but any kind of task force undercover, kind of higher risk individuals I tend to work with. And I say they're higher risk because the people who gravitate towards those roles and then stay in those roles, be it undercover or TAC,
Yeah.
right? Their biology is different, man. I swear. I can't prove that, but
Yeah.
they just function differently. And so now at this point in my career, I'm even more fine-tuned, right, to just the higher risk individuals that are engaging in activities that, high stakes, high risk, right?
Yeah.
And I love that group. I think that's really fun that my competitive nature comes out. They're also the very worst and most difficult to get into any kind of therapeutic relationship. So that's pretty much you know, that's a competition. I like it. I enjoy the challenge accepted on that one. But what I notice in that group of people is they have some characteristics. So there's some psychological characteristics I notice in that group is they've usually played sports. They've usually been competitive their whole life. The vast majority of them have some kind of chip on their shoulder. Now, whether or not you can see it is totally freaking different. And the ones that tend to really excel and be like the dudes or the gals, I don't want to be totally sexist. There's a
Yeah.
few gals in there, but are the ones that I think that have also had a little bit of accumulated trauma, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like they've cut their teeth on something else, right? And so there's nothing that helps people be better in those roles than having a little bit of dirt, a little bit of trauma, I think. So
Yeah.
that's what I notice.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, if I look at the SWAT guys that I work with, or even some of the guys at work,
Yeah.
a lot, especially combat vets, right? I have a kind of special place for my brothers, combat veterans who are also cops, where we decided from when 18, 19, whenever we joined, we decided to stay in that fight, so to speak. And it's all by choice, right? We decided that this is the path we're going to take, and that's it. And we didn't look back. No regrets, nothing. So whatever we saw overseas, whatever we did overseas, and then we come back home and we decide to become cops. I think all of that, to me, all of that came with us, all that experience, because I still use a lot of that experience from overseas in this profession of law enforcement, where it's not like the super sexy tactical shit that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the deep connection to other humans, like the very, just your presence alone can either um, I get a lot of compliance just by like, just when I show up, like people just, you have that aura, whatever you want to call it, where they're like, oh, this fucking dude does not mess around. Like, and then, it's over. Or if somebody decides they want, let's say, attack me or whatever, they learn real quick why not, because we can snap our finger and we're working, right? So I think that's the main thing. And I agree with you, because I think, again, all the guys on my SWAT team, they're all athletes, right? We are all athletes, like we is of some form, and it's 100% true. And they, like, with me, especially lately, I've been really trying as much as I can to really build self-awareness and awareness around me. So, and I've been doing that for the past, I don't know, 5, 6 years, maybe longer. And, again, I don't know if you see anybody like any other officers that you work with that are just kind of like starting to migrate that direction, because to me, self-awareness starts with obviously within. And there's a great quote by a famous samurai, last name Musashi. He would say that if you can't control yourself, how can you control others?
Yep.
So, that's one of the things that I always talk about. And is that something that you also see on your end when you're talking to first responders?
So I'll say what I see, going back a little bit on what you said about kind of the bonding that happens, like straight up trauma bonds are real, right?
Yeah.
And so you bond pretty closely with
Oh, yeah.
people. The soul gets developed over hard experiences. It totally does. So it makes sense that once you've had those difficult experiences, there's no going back. But they also don't have to be experiences that harm you or make you worse of a human. They can
Yeah.
make you much better, in my opinion, I
Yeah.
think. And so I also think that what you're describing about, hey, the best lessons learned are learned under a little bit of pressure directly ties back to neuropsychology, because we know that when there's emotional valence or high intensity, your brain will take in and encode information better.
Yeah.
And so within reason,
Yeah.
obviously, if it's too intense, not so much. But I mean, everything you're describing, those lessons are learned under the pressure cooker, and that pressure cooker actually makes the lessons stay better. So I will say that. I will also say self-awareness is really interesting in high performers, because I think that, well, we know one thing for sure. We do know that under high stress and high trauma conditions, high exposures to those things, your self-awareness will naturally go down.
Yeah.
Naturally. You just will start to lose it. And a lot of it has to do with, in this career, you are so busy looking outward, scanning for threat, that you don't have enough reserves or mental resources to scan inward for what's actually happening with you.
Yeah.
So So I run this little experiment. I'm going to run it with you really quickly. You might be able to do it, you might not. You're working on your self-awareness already. So
Yep.
maybe you've above and beyond the lesson I'm about to teach. So when I'm teaching to brand new baby cops about self-awareness, they have no idea what I'm talking about, first of all. We can get back to that later. But I have them do this like 2-second exercise where I say, hey, put your feet on the floor, just sit where you're at, don't cross your arms. And without actually putting your fingers up to your neck and taking your pulse, I want to see if you can feel your heartbeat in your chest. And about half of the class and newbie officers say, yes, I can do it. And I just give them 2 seconds to do it. I say, ready, go, ready, stop, right? Like pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah,
And about half of the officers will raise their hand and say, yep, I can feel my heart beating in my chest. That's called interoception. It's a sign of developing self-awareness or having self-awareness internally. If I do it with my guys and gals that have been on a while, I say, same exact exercise. Don't give them what I'm measuring. They will almost always never be able to quickly tap into feeling their actual heartbeat. That interoception is what we call it. And a lot of that has to do with high stress conditions make you scan outward.
yeah,
And so your brain's like any other muscle. What you practice grows.
yeah,
So if you are constantly practicing scanning outward for threat, and there's no resources for inward, then those inward abilities, paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and your actual physiological sensations, those atrophy just like anything else. Like if
yeah,
you only work arms and don't work legs, you tech guys do that. I know
yeah.
you do that. So I have seen the medium shirts. So
Yeah,
I
oh, yeah.
know.
Listen, we all wear them, all right?
For sure, for sure. So I think that like that in itself is a little exercise that's fascinating. But if you think about it, it's adaptable to not have immediately great self-awareness. Because if I'm running into danger and I have to think about, wow, this is a really fucked up situation, or I'm really nervous, then I'm maybe not going to do it.
Yeah,
Right? You're going to have that extra hurdle to cross over. So I think that, especially for newbies, people who are new to the profession, toning out or tuning out the self-awareness actually kind of is immediately adaptive. It'll help a little bit,
yeah.
right? But over the long haul, you're totally screwed
Oh
if you
yeah.
can't pay attention.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's 100% true, especially, with the rates of first responders, whether it's committing suicide or, alcohol, drugs, abuse drugs, stuff like that, especially in the high performance community of first responders. It does take a lot because, my wife complains, like sometimes I get home and I'm just like done. I'm spent. And she's like, we got to do this, do this. I'm like, I'm done. Like I can't think of anything else right now. It's because the reality is because so much of my energy is used out there that I come back home and my family gets leftovers, unfortunately. Right. And I that's why with the self-awareness piece of, the past several years of me doing it and really working on it, it helps me tap that reserve that I need to be home, especially with, like my son. I always say he's high functioning autistic and he's very like, you got to be present with him, when he's talking to you, because he'll look at you like, why aren't you paying attention? I'm like, sorry, dude, go ahead. Like he'll,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
yeah,
No filter.
no,
I can tell you're not paying attention.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's the thing though. It kind of keeps me present, with him and not be able to kind of go in my head and stuff like that. Do you find that with the high performers that you work with, we get in our own heads a lot?
Oh gosh, yeah. Ruminate. You guys ruminate and get a little obsessive about details
Yeah.
that don't even freaking matter. Um, and I think my theory on why you guys do that is most of your temperaments and personalities anyway have a high need for control. And you guys go through life because the stakes are so high, having to believe that I can control the vast majority of my experiences, right?
Yeah.
And that's actually really important for your job. We don't want people doing this job who think, well, screw it, I can't control anything,
Yeah.
right? So the personality type that gravitates to these high performance roles tends to be one that's really self-critical, but also has a high need for control.
Yeah.
And that's great. We want that. But the downside of that, the Achilles heel of having high need for control, is that in the situations where you underperformed or you don't think you performed as well as you should have, you take over control over things that aren't even in your lane.
Yeah.
So, it'll be tiny stuff that you will start obsessing about, like, well, why did this happen? I couldn't control this. That means I'm not the best, not the whatever.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I am.
Yeah.
When really you never really had that in your control to begin with, and that little peek behind the curtain into that kind of shows up, and then you guys start obsessing about it. So
Yeah. So again, like lately with me, it's no longer about control anymore. Again, it's so to me, what I do when I see chaos or where I see, for example, the other day, bad car accident, and I was the first one there. I was the road sergeant, first one there, and I'm like, holy shit, this is a good crash. We had a lady pinned in the car, stuff like that, and my method now is reshaping that chaos, kind of moving the pieces around to a point where now it's manageable, not controlled, but
yeah.
manageable.
How do
And
you do that? Like, what's the process? I'm curious to know.
yeah, so my process is now I show up and it's funny, you probably on my body cam, I'm like, oh shit, because you're like you don't know what you're walking into, and all I heard was
Okay.
yeah, car crash and airbags deployed, blah blah blah. I'm like, all right, so I make my way, and the first thing I say, literally, probably it'll show up on body cam. I'll say, oh shit, and I'm like, okay, so I'll run out. I ran out, and it's kind of so the process that I take is I take the entire scene in. And it could be in a microsecond or a second. I just quick scan and I'm like, okay, this is what I got. And when I do that, I already have an idea in my head of several ideas in my head of how I want this to be reshaped, how I want this moved around. How am I going to, because one, it's a major, major city intersection that is extremely busy. So, and I have an injured woman pinned in a car, and I also have two other injured people, on the other side. So the process is when I take it all in, I think what I do, again, from internal, now I'm talking like subconscious type stuff, is I allow myself to do what I need to do. I don't control myself. I allow myself to gravitate towards what needs to be done. You get what I mean? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense, but that's only possible if you're already an expert.
I'm not an expert, trust me.
No, but like you're an expert in how to act under stress, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So you're basically saying like, I kind of move over and just let kind of my natural instinct take over. Well,
yeah,
instincts are one thing,
yeah.
but in those types of situations, there's also like a massive amount of training and rules and logic and all these things at play, right?
Oh, yeah,
And so
yeah,
yeah, to step back and let you like have a little faith in kind of yourself
yeah,
comes from high reps.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like that brand new baby cop coming on who can barely figure out where to put their hands, does not have that knowledge set yet.
No, no, and again, this is me years later. When I was a brand new cop, I was a whole different animal. But
There's
again,
a lot
though,
of holy shit
yeah,
going by. Okay.
exactly. And,
Yeah.
and but that's the thing, though. Like when I see other cops who have just about the same time as me, or even longer, they're not able to perform as the way I would, and that's something where I've learned acceptance. Right? There's some that are just not going to be that way, right? And they're just not going to be able to perform the way I want them because I'm a sergeant at work. So the way I perform is very different than the way the next guy performs, very different than the way this other officer would perform. So I've had to kind of learn that I'm more of a mentor, more of a coach, more of a, I'm not, I hate the word supervisor. I really hate it. To me, it sounds like, industrial age, like, I'm giving you orders and you're going to do it type shit. Like, I'm not into that.
Old
And
school Stanley lunch pail coming out of the
exactly,
back.
exactly. I hate it. And, so I always, to me, like the officers with me, like I'm there to help them in their journey in this profession, whether they ask me questions and I give them all the info that I have, do the info dump, or if they need help on a case and I help them out, and I'm like, that's all I really do now. So it's not this, I'm not the hard charger that I was really anymore. I just take everything that I've learned and everything that I've experienced and put it back towards them because they need it more than me, and
Yeah. Do you miss those hard charging days?
oh my God, yeah. There's times where I'm just like, I just want to let loose and just go. But, again, to me, it's one of those, like even on my SWAT team now, the younger guys are doing more of the work, yeah, I'm one of older operator, so to speak. And I'm just like, yeah, you know what? You accept it, right? Because that's just the way the game is played. I'm not gonna run as fast as the 23-year-old or 24, 25, 26-year-old SWAT guy anymore. Like, no, that's not me anymore. Like I'm gonna do what I gotta do, you know? But there are times, I miss that rush, finding guns in a car and stuff like that. But to me, I'm like, yeah, these young lions are coming up now. They're going to be the next high performer, right? So instead of me being that high performer, I'd rather be that coach to that high performer, so they can take the reins. They can kind of take the torch and do what they got to do, and I'm just going to be that old dude, sitting back and keeping it going. But to me, it's about training. That's where now we'll move like slowly towards training. That's why I think training is so paramount for these young cops, because death by PowerPoint is not training, right?
So bad.
It's
Yeah.
terrible, and doing reps under low stress is also terrible, equally as
Yes.
terrible, because in reality, as well as I do, the real world is not controlled.
No.
We don't notionalize. All right, we're gonna notionalize that you got breaching equipment. We're gonna notionalize this. We're gonna notion like that doesn't work in the real world. In the real world, you deal with what's in front of you, right, and everything else that comes with it. So in terms of training the officers, and I know you train with the high tactical teams and stuff like that. What is it that you give them, or what is it that you provide for these officers?
Yeah. So first of all, congratulations on moving from the young lion to the wise old owl. Good
Yeah.
job. That's
Yeah.
good. I hope you get a nickname eventually. So that's how you know you're truly loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. 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 So when I work with tactical teams in particular, my roles have been kind of unique with them. So I used to just be like post incident response, right? Like they get into shooting, they come see me, come see me for a few visits, whatever. We have a certain protocol that we use based
Hmm.
on some of the science, by the way, that protocol is stuff like, hey, we know that a lot of officers will be okay initially after an incident, and then it like pops up later. It pops up a month later or 3 months later. So our protocol for officer involved shootings at any agency I work with is you're not just seen just once, you're seen like upwards of 4 times.
Yeah.
Once initially after you make your criminal statement or whatever, right?
Yep.
And then I'll see you at the 1 week post return to work mark, and then the 1 month and 3 month marks. And that's honestly just because the research says it's going to pop later,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it might pop initially, but honestly, a lot of times people are just like grateful to be alive.
Yeah.
And then they start obsessing about their performance levels, which especially my tech guys do that, right? And they kind of get in the weeds. But then what I notice next, and this kind of leads to my newer role with tactical teams, is then they start, when they get in my office, a lot of them will comment on, I hope when I go back to work, people still trust me. I hope that I'm still part of the crew, like all those things, right? They express a little bit of self-doubt and like they don't want to be kicked out of the tribe. And that never happens, by the way. It's
Yeah.
very rare that
Yeah.
happen, because by the time you've made it to that team, you're either accepted or you're not, a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think a lot of them express a little bit of self-doubt or a little bit of like, do I belong doubt, right? And so a lot of what I do now is help tactical teams like develop the tightest, most healthiest group dynamic possible. And then also help them with some of their like switching up a little bit of their training. It's kind of shocking how outdated some training is, especially what we know about the human brain under stress. It's like the sciencey part of the world, of the brain in the world, and how we know the brain operates under stress has not integrated into actual law enforcement training.
Yeah.
Now, a little bit more in the tactical team world, right? And the SWAT world, but
Yeah.
not so much on the line level, which is actually pretty concerning.
Yeah.
So I do both kind of the social psych side where I work in groups and teams and helping them develop good psychological environments so that people operate at their best levels, because we know that that is a huge factor.
Yeah.
Help a little bit with coaching with leadership, making sure that line level leadership is tight
Yeah.
and also in step with the culture of the unit.
Yeah.
And then I follow that up with also kind of a little bit of the cognitive stuff. How do we help people train better under stress? So that's a long answer, but like different avenues I work with teams.
No, I mean, that's great, because it's, to me, training a cop or training a first responder, military, it has to be in a holistic type event. We can't just train one way and that's it, right? We have to be able to train in multiple different ways. And that's why, when I train cops, on my off time, my training really revolves around how they react under stress. Because to me, that is the most fascinating lesson you will ever learn. I always tell people, I'm like, man, my debriefs, they're long and they're in depth. It's because it has to be. You might do a scenario, the scenario might last, I don't know, however long I make it last, but it could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But you know what? That debrief is going to be 40 minutes long, because that's the best lesson that they will learn about themselves, especially when I hook up the heart rate monitors to them, when I'm watching every little move they make and dissecting it. And literally they I record it, because I'm sure you've worked with TAC teams. If you're not recording them and they do something and you call them out on it, never happened. Like, come on, I didn't do that shit.
I'm above that.
Yeah, yeah,
Come on.
yeah, exactly. And then I show them the video and they're like, huh, okay, I guess I did do that.
For me.
Yeah. But then I bring it back. I'm like, all right, why didn't you remember you did that?
Yeah.
I was like, you hit that cognitive overload that we always talk about.
Yeah.
You hit that peak because you were moving so fast, because you were so amped up, so tunnel visioned into that one little, obsessed over that one little detail. You missed this other stuff. So that, to me, those lessons are extremely important, because again, it comes down to their own self-awareness of what they are capable of doing under stress. Because I'm sure you know as well as I do, every one of us handles stress differently. Every one of us can handle a gallon size worth amount of stress, and some guys are pint size and some are like a shot glass and they're done. And that's kind of the training that I do, is I expose them to how much they can actually take, because it's an
So
important
that,
lesson.
yeah. The allostatic load, what
Yeah.
somebody's like actual measuring cup, basically.
Yeah.
Allostatic load is like clinical term,
Yeah.
or a scientific term. But I also think it's really important to start to grow that, because I've noticed in the newer generation of folks coming through, and we can bitch about it all day long. It is what it is,
Yeah.
that they don't have enough experiences that have taught them how to grow their load. How can they withstand more stress over
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
Because society's not getting any
No.
easier, life's not getting any easier.
Yeah.
And then we're going to throw this brand new job at you that you think is like, whatever, live PD, which it's not,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
not always that
Exactly.
fun. So,
Exactly.
or yeah, or compliant. So a lot of times I think that we have to think about how are we going to grow their baseline level of tolerance. And going back a little bit and stacking on top of that, I will also say, I think that we focus a lot on cognitive overload or stimulus-based overload when we train with tactical teams. But some of the self-awareness also needs to come into play when we talk about, well, what went on the night before, or what's going on in your personal life,
Yeah.
or how do you feel about your partner next to you? How do you feel about your coach/sergeant, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever
Yeah.
your team lead is.
Yeah.
And that is the stuff that actually starts to add to your, cup of what you can handle. And you can hit your allostatic load, your load much faster. I think when you're not aware of how the other things, even before you showed up for that training day, accumulated.
I'll give you a quick story of, this was 2020. I don't know if you've already heard it on previous shows, but I talk about it because it really kind of highlighted that allostatic load and kind of all the things that had to amount into that one day that, that 2, 3 days later I felt. And it was just, we went after this really, really, really bad dude in Boston. He's like a gang enforcer type, shootings, whatever. Our threat matrix had him at like 97% to get into shooting with us. Like he was a bad, bad dude. So we were preparing for like a firefight essentially. And right before we went in, and I'm weird, I'm able to sleep before an op like it's easy. For me, I'm like people, guys are like, dude, how are you able to do that? I don't know. I just sleep, but,
There's different people can do that.
yeah,
It's fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah.
I pass out no problem. But so that morning we go into our briefing, we're talking about the game plan. This is what we're doing. I'm going, for me, I'm number one. I'm going with the shield, and the shield's like this 55-pound shield, rifle rated shield, and everything, and gonna go directly to the bad guy. We're not gonna like our job is get to him like right away. So during the briefing, one of the Boston cops, gets up. He's like, "Hey, thanks guys for doing this," blah blah blah. And then he says, "Hey, just you guys are aware the local DA here is looking to basically fuck a cop." over this mission. If
Oh,
anything
good.
goes wrong, like they're gonna go after the cop. I'm like, great, I'm number one through the door, you know. So
Add a little more.
so I'm like, okay, that now add that to the back of my head, right? Now, not only am I number one through the door, I'm the guy with the shield, so I got to protect all the other guys behind me to make, once this guy starts shooting, I got to make sure everybody else is covered. And I'm the biggest guy there, I'm the biggest guy there. So they couldn't, it's funny, later on, they told me they couldn't even see over my shoulders or what the heck was going on when I was moving in. But so we go in, and I see him, he sees me, the bad guy. He ducks into his bedroom and I'm like, getting to him. And he goes, we make entry and he's grabbing a Glock extended mag. I remember black Glock handgun, extended mag. And I had my gun right on the back of his head. I said, don't grab it. Don't you grab it. And I'm already squeezing the trigger. And he just let go. And I'm like, okay, that's done. But it hit me 3 days later, though.
Yeah.
Like it just hit me hard 3 days later because I'm like, whoo, I'm like, I felt it because it's weird with us, like anything that we feel as SWAT guys, whatever, we just cram it down. Fear, anxiety, whatever it might be. When we're working. Like it doesn't matter. And I remember I had my iWatch before I actually had the whoop. My iWatch, my Apple Watch, my heart rate at that time was at 209. It thought I was having a heart attack. And it was like, nope, 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 I'm not, nope, not heart attack. I had to cancel whatever it was doing, the SOS shit or whatever. But yeah, so in thinking about that, I mean, have you seen on your end like high performers or even the cops that just a couple days later, 3 days, a month later, 3 months later, it just hits them?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I think that there's an old, outdated kind of adage that, your stress response system is a 30-minute window type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And like, here comes the cortisol and blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
Look, that's bullshit. Some of that might be somewhat accurate, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we do not know enough about the human body to know exactly how long the stress cycle is.
Yeah.
And what kind of unique stressor will and where in the world will we be able to study that and get the numbers to study that repetitively, So I don't see that at all. I also think that there's a degree of your mechanisms for holding down emotion have to be really strong. No one's going to call you to come help them if you show up freaking crying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to be able to do your job. So you guys get so good at holding stuff down that I think that it's a very adaptive thing in the moment. And sometimes it extends out a little longer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Your brain and body feeling safe is going to take more than, if somebody tells you it's only going to take you a day or 2 days. Bull.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to take however long it takes.
Yeah,
I've seen
exactly.
people years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Even like I think back like my time in the military when I was in Iraq at war. I mean, there's still shit that pops up with me even to this day, like 20 plus years later. And I think of like my father-in-law who Vietnam War vet, shit pops up with him. He's in his late 70s. Things will just hit him at times. So that's why you're right, where we don't really know how long it takes or how long it stayed. Like it's there. To me, it's there forever because it's kind of the way we went through life and it sort of made us who we are, right? And that's kind of what I see it.
Yeah. Do you want me to get super nerdy on what usually happens?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't want to put everybody to sleep, but so I think it's cool, but maybe everybody else doesn't. So under extreme stress in particular, there's an area of the brain called the hippocampus. And the area of the brain of the hippocampus is in the center of the brain. And one of its jobs is to assign a timestamp to when something happened, past, present, or is it future related? And under extreme stress, when your brain has to move as fast as possible to keep you or others safe, it will bypass the hippocampus. And so then those memories don't have appropriate timestamps. And that's why stuff can come back up and into the picture and feel like it was yesterday, is because the timestamp was never assigned.
Yeah. Is that where the amygdala and the basal ganglia, is that like, once it starts going down, I call it the primal, like that's your primal instincts, where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think of it like a triangle. So at the very, very base of the triangle, so upside down triangle where the narrow part is at the bottom.
Yeah.
That's the picture of your brain. Right there is the amygdala. The amygdala is actually just the danger signal. It doesn't tell you exactly what it is. It just says, "Hey, dude, that doesn't feel right." Right?
Yeah.
It's very neutral on that.
Yeah.
It just says danger, danger. Then it goes through the hippocampus usually, and that's where the intensity of the emotion gets assigned as well as the timestamp. Then it goes to the front part of your brain or the big part of the triangle,
Yeah.
and that's where the big part decides. It's a slower system, so it
Yeah.
takes longer. That's where it decides what kind of threat and how am I going to behave. Right?
Okay.
And so yeah, it's tied back to kind of that like reptilian brain, that what keeps us alive brain, and
Yeah.
we have zero control over it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times the timestamp being screwed up is what causes those memories to come back so vividly.
Well, that now we'll talk about. Actually, I want to touch on amygdala hijack. Can you explain that part of when it literally takes over and you're panicked?
Yeah. So do we know everything about this? Absolutely not,
No.
right?
Yeah.
We don't know everything.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, just like I used that analogy earlier, that your brain is like any other muscle.
Yeah.
So if you're always training, I'm going to open a door with my right arm and I'm going to use my bicep and
Yeah.
pull, right? Like you learn that pattern. The same exact thing happens in the brain. So if you are constantly kind of being stimulated through that fight or flight center, what'll happen is it will get overstimulated and go faster and get triggered faster. I have two analogies for this. One analogy I have is it's kind of like ruts in a road.
Mm.
So if you drive down a gravel road a whole bunch of times, you're going to get ruts in the road. I'm from Kansas. We got lots of gravel roads still,
Mm.
right? And so if you drive down it, you're going to have ruts. It's going to take a lot for you to overcorrect your tires to get out of the ruts. So
Yeah.
that's how I think of amygdala hijacking, or kind of the fight or flight hijacking a little bit. I think we simplify it a little too much, honestly, when we start talking to cops about it. So the other analogy I use is, you are in not a great place when you have a Ferrari engine running with a 97 Honda Accord radiator cooling it.
Yeah, that's not good.
That makes any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I know people get that, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't know shit about cars, but I think that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
So, okay, good, good, good. So, that Ferrari engine that's running super hot, that's your amygdala, that's your fight or flight response, that's your reactivity center.
Yeah.
And when people are constantly exposed to stress, high trauma situations, their radiator, the cooling system, starts to wear itself out. And then you just become less capable of like toning it down. Right.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, again, on a personal level, when I came home from war, from Iraq, my resting heart rate was at like 130 to 135.
Crazy. Yeah.
When I went to see the docs, and I'm like, "Hey, is this normal?" They're like, "No, let's see what's going on." And it turned out that my adrenal gland never learned to turn off. So I was in that hypervigilant state the entire time I was home for like 6, 7 months, not realizing why. And do you find, or is there research out for first responders, cops that hit that just they're always in that hypervigilance mode?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of them end up with adrenal fatigue type stuff. And some people debate whether or not that's real. But I will say they end up with like a chronic fatigue spectrum. And then they end up in like kind of the metabolic disorder spectrum after that, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we get cops.
Yeah.
And that's cardiac disease and a whole bunch of other factors, right? So I will tell you, to directly answer your question, one of the things that police and law enforcement as a whole are really bad at is research.
Yeah. Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just asked me a research question. I'm like, dude, we don't know shit about cops when it
Yeah.
comes to what's the actual data, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything.
Think,
So I would say, yeah, hypothetically, yes.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think, the profession has been so closed doors for so long that it can't be that way really anymore. Because, from what I found training cops and even, working with cops and being on a SWAT team and stuff like that, like, a lot of things need to be studied for cops. Like a lot of research needs to be done in order to help the officers out, help the profession to really put it together. And to me, like, I always use this analogy, like, the NFL, NHL, MLB, they spend millions on their athletes. Research studies, sports science, exercise science, all this shit. And cops, the closest we get to research is for science. That's the closest that I've ever seen. That's the closest I've ever seen.
in that arena in particular. And there's these little like kind of smaller, industries popping up with regards to this because I think people get it now. Like we
Yeah.
have no data on anything,
Yeah.
right? And so, you have National Policing Institute and some other groups coming out actually starting to do the research. But because of the type of stuff we're studying, it's such a rare event, the things that we try to study, that it's going to take a huge amount of time and data sets
Yeah.
to really parse apart stuff. Like that's kind of the downside about research and law enforcement. But I think we're at least making it a priority. That is a positive of, I think, the 2020 anti-cop movement that's coming out. I think personally, like at least we go, well, yeah, maybe we should have some numbers on this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the anti-cop movement kind of woke up the training side a little. They need to do a lot more better. Not they need to train us on stuff that actually matters, not on stuff that
Yeah.
doesn't matter. That's the thing. It's they're picking and choosing different things that really, okay, this is great. Okay, now we're doing implicit bias. Okay, all right,
Which
thanks.
we know
You
is
know,
then sometimes make it worse,
yeah,
actually. So,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
so I'll take a step back further. Okay. And
Yeah,
this is like maybe a little bit more controversial topic, but you don't seem like the type of guy that avoids that.
no,
So, um, I will say, I think, yeah, of course we need to like update our training and all that kind of stuff, but we probably also need to decide what kind of profession we're actually going to be. Like
yeah,
what is actually our lane?
yeah,
One of the things that really is frustrating to watch is that if nobody knows how to take care of it, we're like, well, let's put it in the police department.
yeah,
Like, how did animal control end up in the police department? What is
yeah,
that?
yeah.
You know? Look, I'm a mental health professional. I'll be the first to tell you. How did you guys end up being the social workers for the entire United States of
Yeah,
America?
for
What are we
society.
doing?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, what are we doing?
yeah.
And I think that it was like, oh, there's a need, and it feeds the hole in my soul, so I'll take it. As a profession. And I don't know if that's helping you guys. I wish you guys would get back to basics on a few things.
No, that's the thing is during the 2020 movement and all that and police reform, and it was very confusing for us to figure out like, okay, what the hell do you want? Like, what do you want from us? Do you want what? Like we enforce laws, yes, but then you're calling us because your kid won't get out of bed to go to school. Like, really?
Mm.
Why is that a police issue parenting your child?
I'll
Or
tell you.
yeah,
Yeah.
or the other one, there are times where if I'm working inside as the shift commander and we'll get a call, I'll say we're not sending anybody to that. Like absolutely
Mhm.
not, because that has nothing to do with what we do. And that's the thing. A lot of it has to do with filtering, being able to filter that stuff out. But it needs to come from the national level. Like, hey, we're going back to basics. This is what we're doing. This is the job of what it is to be a cop, and everything else needs to have its own thing, right? And that's the thing. Like now in our PD and majority PDs have clinicians that go out with cops, which is great. But even then, even with the clinicians, the outcome stays the same really sometimes from what I've seen.
Yes. Okay. So I'm glad you brought this up because I always feel bad bringing it up and knocking my entire profession. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
What are we going to like, okay, well, at the end of the day, we need places to take these people that are still having crises,
Yeah.
right? And that doesn't exist anymore. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. You can put as many co-responders as you want out there. If you don't have actual solutions, we're just putting, to quote Taylor Swift, we're just putting band-aids over bullet holes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing,
Yeah,
you
that's
know?
100% accurate, and that's the thing. Like even with the social workers, they'll because I've worked. I actually did a grant for my PD, and we were awarded a good sum of money to bring in social workers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But even then, you find that there are no beds available. There's
Oh,
nothing else really that they can do, and it's like the same outcome happens when the cop is even there. Whether it's a clinician or the cop, the outcome remains the same.
yes, I agree. I
Yep.
know, I agree. I think so. This is not my phrase, but diluted focus gets diluted results.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I forget exactly where it's from. It's not mine,
Yeah.
but yeah, diluted focus gets diluted results. And I think that the more and more that law enforcement and policing takes on, the more and more diluted the results will get. And then what's really going to happen if we get really technical about it is on the individual officer level, if you have diluted results, you're going to feel like what you do doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
tell you that, for a time it became that way for a lot of us, especially post 2020 and everything. We're like, what the hell are we even doing? Like there's nothing for us to do. And it turned into a very, very reactive time for law enforcement where we're just like, yeah, we're not, if call us if you need us. And even if you call us, we might show up. I don't know. It depends on what the call is. So and again, I don't fault the profession for getting to that mode because politicians had no idea what to do. The public really didn't know what they wanted us to do. Like it turned into this really confusing time period in law enforcement. And even still to this day, it's still that confusion, that goes around. I mean, it's getting better where, yeah, we're starting to be cops again and we're doing the job and we're doing work and all that good stuff. But still, the training side though has not caught up yet.
Yeah.
It's so far, and that's why, I know you wear a whoop too, right? And
Working on
yeah,
one right now.
yeah. So that's the thing. Like, to me, part of the whole thing with whoop is that, self-awareness, self-evaluation after a critical incident, after this, like, I did my training to SWAT. I was looking at all my numbers and all my matrix and all that stuff, and I was like, yeah, this is definitely tomorrow. It needs to be a recovery day because I had an intense day. We had intense stuff going on today. So tomorrow's a recovery day. So I already turned my alarm off. I'm not going to work out. I'm just going to rest. I'm just going to sleep, rest, and then go back into it the very next day. So that's the thing with self-awareness, like being able to know your limit too, right? On
Yeah.
how far you can push yourself. And yeah, when I was young, yeah, you give me go run 3 miles and I'll throw up at the end because I'm pushing myself so hard. That's just the way the competitive side of me is. Yeah, I'm going to beat everyone today and I'm going to run. Well, now it's like, yeah, I want to be able to have enough in me to keep going. So that's the thing. So with whoop, it really changed the way I train in reality, and my sleep, my recovery, like, if I, like, it's funny, I was looking at my numbers and we had some really intense days and my recovery was shit for like 3-4 days in a row. And I'm like, oh, and I took the next day off. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I can't go into work, like, because I knew cognitively, like, I wouldn't be performing the way I should be performing. And that would be more detriment to the rest of the squad if the sergeant's not even in the game,
Right.
So I didn't want to be that guy, like, something bad happens. I mean, one night, one day, an officer came in and I could tell they were just tired. And I asked the officer, like, hey, what's going on? And like, oh man, up all night. My pet had to take it to the emergency room, whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, could have just, taken a vacation, whatever. And, they were like, no, I want to come to work. I'm like, all right. So I put them in a quiet sector. Like, all right, just go to a quiet sector and just chill out, and that's it. But again, that comes from leadership, to know your people, right? To know where you can place your people, where they should go. And if they had a bad day, or, yesterday was a bad day, well, I'll put them in a quieter sector today, just to be able to give them that little break that they need. And is that something that you would also kind of coach on your side? Like, hey, if you guys, get too intense. I know, like, with manpower, a lot of times it's tough because we just can't do. And a quick word from our sponsors and supporters. Havoc Journal. Havoc Journal serves as a voice for the veteran and first responder community through a focus on current affairs, articles of interest to the public in general and the veteran community and first responder community in particular. They strive to offer timely, current, and informative content with the occasional piece focused on entertainment. If you type my name into their search block, so it's havocjournal.com, type my name into the search block, and you'll see I've had over 100 articles published through them, and you'll get to see what they're all about. I mean, they have everything, world politics, national security, fitness, and even culture on their website, where you can go in and just read everything that they have. So again, that's havocjournal.com. Head over there. They have Instagram, they have Facebook. Like, share their pages, share their content. Most of them are veterans that run the Havoc Journal, and they do some amazing work out there in the veteran community. Do what we really want to do to help our officers, but is there, like, stuff that you would provide to let's talk about actually leadership, right? On the leadership side, what are some of the things that you coach them on their officers?
So I'm gonna back it up again a little bit. You got a lot of stuff in there that's really good that I want to comment on. So one of it, which is like you have to make the unconscious conscious. And so that's like all these data devices, all this information, you have to make the things about you that you are just operating in the background, right?
Yeah.
You have to make the unconscious conscious before you can ever make any change. And that goes for line level, leadership, everywhere, you name it. Like one of the things about kind of wearing the whoop that I never really, you know, recognized was like, oh yeah, even if I have even a drink, a little bit of alcohol within the first like few hours before bedtime, I had no idea how much it affected my sleep. I had no
Yeah.
clue. But like, that's a good example of now that I'm conscious about it, I can make a decision to change it.
Yeah.
And so when you're giving that example of, hey, one of the people you're supervising comes into work and you notice they're a little off, well, first of all, you have to know what their baseline is.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I get a little concerned about how little awareness of other awareness people have of other people's baselines,
Yeah.
because nothing says, oh, maybe I should pay attention to this, like a change from baseline. And so you have to know the baseline. Now, the whole thing is go know the baseline and know the change from it.
Yeah.
So that's like making the, unconscious conscious. And then you have to decide, well, how am I going to respond now that I'm conscious of it and I'm aware of it?
Yeah.
Many people, when they're burnout, tired, overworked, etc., lose that ability as leaders and as line level, both positions, right? They get so wiped out that they stop paying attention to what's really going on.
Yeah.
So on the leadership level with tactical teams, a lot of times I spend a lot of time having like real talk, conversations with leaders like, hey, I don't think you really knew this, but when you do that, you make people feel this way.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that I'm a contractor, so like it gives me a degree of like a case of the fuckets that's
Yeah.
actually really healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna say this to this guy or gal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and because I'm a contractor,
Yeah.
it's okay. I
Yeah.
never had stability anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And so, you risk it a little bit more, which I think is a breath of fresh air a lot of times for these teams because they're so invested in keeping that team tight that they won't call each other out on certain things, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to disrupt the fabric of the team. And that goes for leadership too. So a lot of times I end up initially becoming the conduit and showing people how to confront each other
Yeah.
and then or bring up issues. And then I said take a step back. That's kind of my process. And then I coach other people through doing it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so for 54 entities. I mean, you must be extremely busy.
A little bit, a little bit. I don't sleep a ton.
Yeah,
I
that's
really don't sleep. So
yeah, yeah. That I mean, yeah. Just
yeah.
I mean, the amount of work you do is just really impressive, and I mean, you're probably the only doctor that I know that does this type of, especially on the ground application of this kind of stuff. Because for science, I did their advanced analyst, so I did their freaking however long that was. It's a
It's a long
blur
one.
because it
Yeah.
was so long and huge papers and everything. It was a lot of reading and their advanced analyst. I mean, phenomenal course, and it caused my brain to have all this data that is like I can just spit it out, and especially you have to practice it. You can train it, but if you don't practice it, it's going to go away. So for me, I always think about it. I always practice it. I always do it. And in order to bring that sort of research into a police department and actually apply it must be very fulfilling, like very like, oh, they're actually doing the work. They're actually paying attention to these things.
My favorite thing. It's my favorite thing because sometimes I have to get involved in the icky part of psychology, where, people are losing jobs and stuff like that. And that's horrible. I hate that part of the job. But nowadays, I spend a lot more time doing the fun stuff, which is helping groups and teams get better. So I get to take the science and apply it. I have a specialty in traumatic brain injury,
Yeah.
right? So with tactical operators, I get to spend a little bit more time thinking about how we train differently. So you have a little less exposure to overblast or overpressure, right? And just little things like that. That, by the way, when you bring in a psychologist into your team and they get to tweak little things, you're saying to your team, we care enough about you to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you, buy-in is always hard with that group,
Yeah.
but I get the blessing of having a reputation of being a little bit more boots on the ground. So I think people are more likely to, get the buy-in, but
Yeah.
you have to get your hands dirty in order to be respected by these folks. So,
Yeah.
I have the attention span of a hummingbird, but I have gone to the range and shot, and I'm horrible. But it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not dangerous. I'm just horrible. So, but there's some respect in doing that. And then I think also just like showing up and saying, hey, here's this new thing. You guys do with it what you want. Like, kind of, I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to force it on you, but
Yeah.
holler at me if you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
After you're really embedded with the team, they eat that stuff up. Like, I just sent one of my tactical team leads an article on microblasts, right? And just how to train a little differently. And that in itself infiltrated the rest of the unit. And sometimes once I've been there long enough, I just give them the little nuggets and let the leadership lead if
Yeah.
I've already built that trust up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's again like the work you're doing is it's really remarkable, and I'm glad we have somebody like you. Even though you're away from New England area, but bringing to light a lot of good, sound research, scientifically backed training methods and stuff like that to really be able to reshape the training. And that's the thing. To me that's the most important thing, and it's a lesson learned. I learned way back, when I went to war, on how important training is, because if you're not training the right way, I mean, there's actually great phrase. I didn't make it up. It was another cop. I don't know where he got it, but he says practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. So if you've
Mhm.
been training it wrong all this time, guess what? Now you've been training wrong. So it's one of those things where I want that practice to be permanent, like to make it permanent in everyone's minds of what they're like under
Yeah.
pressure, what they're like under stress, and how to perform in those environments, and how to capitalize on that stress. Where, I tell people, I'm like, listen, your hearing, your eyes, your smell, everything is just so intense that you're taking stuff in without even realizing it. And being able to have them to go from, like, seeing a little to seeing just enough is huge,
Yeah.
and they really appreciate, and I could tell they really appreciate that sort of method of training, because it's not being done.
Well, and a lot of my efforts now are spent left of bang, right?
Yeah.
So I used to be right of bang. Everything was right of bang after the incident, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Now a lot of my stuff is left of bang. So
Yeah.
now what I'm doing is I'm taking what we know scientifically to be like the 6 elements of resiliency.
Yeah.
We take those, and I call them anti-fragility because I want people to actually grow from their bad experiences,
Yeah.
not just recover,
Yeah.
right? And we take those and we try to embed them early because I can't stop bad incidents from happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to happen. That's your job.
Yeah.
And so how do I make you all high on all 6 elements of anti-fragility so that when the incident happens, you're ready to roll,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if we focus right a bang, I hate to say this and be real negative, but our best therapies for post-traumatic stress in particular are like 41 to 53% effective. That's kind of bad. That's
Yeah.
not that great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's for normal people, by the way. So
Yeah.
that's even, you guys know how much up you guys can be.
Yeah.
So we got to do something else differently. Otherwise, we're just going to be sending broken people home to back to their families and in the end of career, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I'm spending a lot more time focusing on how do we manage the front end of it now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and that's actually was going to lead to my next question. What's new with the doc? What's she up to this year? Actually, if there's anything
There
that
you
you want to
go.
share, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've started to, because it's 54 different agencies in 3 states and all that kind of stuff. I took a step back about 2 years ago and said, I am going to die in my therapy chair, seeing people one after horrible incidents if I do not put something together that helps people on the front end. So about 2.5 years ago, I started really digging into the research on prevention. And I think we're finally taking a turn in this direction, like as an entire culture,
yeah,
and realizing, like, first of all, can I just back up and say one of the things that annoys me the most to hear is it's okay to not be okay.
hmm
Stop. Stop it with that. It's actually not good. You're not in a good spot. And we need to do more than awareness. We need
yeah,
to have some action steps here.
yeah,
And so one of my peeves, my pet peeves, my gripes is that, we get these brand new baby cops in and we give them a gun and a badge and all this kind of stuff. And then we tell them all the horror stories about how this career is going to jack you up. And then we don't give them anything to prevent it. So they're like, oh, great. Okay, cool. But no action steps, right?
yeah,
So, okay, that's worthless, right?
yeah,
So now I'm working on the front end, giving brand new officers and field trainers information about how to prevent post-traumatic stress.
yeah,
And so I teach field trainers mostly how to teach their brand new recruits how to think about stress
yeah,
so that it's like embedded in it's a cultural norm.
yeah,
And that program, tactical longevity, but I think that's where the future's headed. It's not in in focusing after the fact. We have
Yeah.
to focus before.
Oh,
Yeah.
nah, I love it. I love it. And, thank you so much for coming on. We're getting towards that time where I'd like, for you to, if you could, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's like any advice you want to give out to first responders, something that they can just, a quick little thing, even actually the heartbeat, I actually like that. Just something to give them to think about it, tonight, tomorrow shift, or whatever they're doing.
A phrase or something I say a lot. Invest in your culture now or pay for it later, but with interest. So that's for groups and teams. That's also for yourself. Invest in yourself now or pay for it later, but with interest.
Yeah, like that. Well, everybody think about it. Like that says it all. That says it
Wraps
all.
it up.
It really does. It really does say it all. But Doc, thank you so much for coming on, and a really good episode, and really I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. Where can people find you? Where can they reach you?
Probably the easiest place is through the website, tacticallongevity.com. That's the easiest one. And then you can send us an email through there. That's probably the easiest. Then I've got, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn stuff, first responder psychologist. You can find me that way too.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Doc, for joining us, and everybody else, please stay safe and stay sapient.